Podcasting with Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. This week's episode, I was going to talk about the buzzer fishing or the duck fly, which has been the last few weeks on Lough Corrib, where most of the anglers have all been down the bottom end of the lake, in the Saddle, Marker 50, Lime Island, and other areas below Knock Ferry. Sport has been mixed. I've had a couple of days myself, but it's very much hit or miss with the conditions. But what I have started to notice over the last week or so, there are mayflies starting to come off. Only a few, so instead of putting a podcast up on what's been, I thought it's important to make the most of what's coming up, because May time, it just flies, doesn't it? And we're planning for it all year, the peak of the season, and then all of a sudden it's gone. So I thought I'd put together this episode, and instead of me chatting about what's in store, what can be expected, and the flies and the hatches and areas, I thought something would be nice to do is do a bumper episode, you could say, of a selection of some of the best stories and chats and information you can have from guests I have, going back over 200 episodes. So I picked the cream of the crop, you can say. I made this episode all about the mayfly, and mostly the Corrib, Lough Arrow and Sheelin. Well, I hope you all have a fantastic couple of weeks ahead, because the hatches are just starting now. So sit back and enjoy. Episode 182, Kevin Sheridan, Lough Sheelin. Just had a brew with a kettle and some sandwiches, and we were talking about in time they'll be spent coming on the water, and during the time we've been sitting here now, all of a sudden we see 1, 2, 3, 4, and I thought that was pretty impressive. But around us now, there's a few hundred just ready. So what is the norm? What will happen now then? Like, is dampness in the air, so you don't think they'll go out yet?
No, what will happen is that they'll keep dancing low, and they'll keep underneath the trees. So once they'll feel that dampness, that rain is going to just keep them lowered to the ground. So what to do is that they'll come back into the trees, and underneath the leaves, the leaves will protect them. We've already seen it one occasion where they were actually dancing, and the rain came and they actually went back on. So you can actually see where we're looking now, in between a shed and an old boathouse.
Yeah.
And they're actually underneath the tree, and the tree foliage is actually protecting them for when they go out. You can even see them up on top there. They're actually doing the dance now. So that's the mating, basically, that's happening up there.
It's quite magical, isn't it?
It is. It's really, really impressive. Like, you know, even like when you're out fishing, like, this is when you should be having a look at what you're doing, why you're fishing it. Like, this is the magic part of it. So, like, when they go out, they'll basically just go with the wind across the lake. Like, they'll reach the far side of the shore as well. Like, so they'll just come down onto the surface. They won't even sit on the surface. They'll just a little dimple, and then they keep flying, can keep continuing on until they basically run out of energy, and they'll just sit on it, and then you'll have the trout just coming up and taking them.
And see the birds are feeding. The bird went past there.
Yeah. Like, we've seen that over at the river over on the far shore, where the birds have decided that they're going to have their own little meal.
Like, what is the time now?
It's only 5 o'clock. We're just on 5.
Is it any certain time where you expect it?
No, like, the more it goes on, you're looking at 3 o'clock. If you get a really nice day, really calm day, you could easily see them at 3 o'clock going out. Sometimes the wind actually pushes them out beforehand. So you're basically looking from 3 right up to 7 before they start moving. Yeah. If you get bright sunshine, you're looking maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock before they start moving, and probably into dark. If they don't go out, maybe 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, so it's really up to them. Like, so
So some of these fly hatched out this morning.
Yeah.
And they just flew in
Yeah.
to the trees.
Like last night when I was here, the spent never went out. For some unknown reason, which was a nice evening, they stayed under. But the way they're dancing now, we'd be looking at a good fall this evening.
I've been on Corrib and Arrow this trip now, and I've never seen so many fly. Like, I've heard people talk about Sheelin, and to experience it now. And when we went out this morning, and we went up towards the hotel there, wasn't it?
Yeah, up to the Crover House Hotel.
Yeah, and the amount of fly I saw was more in the space of an hour there, and I've seen the other two lakes put together. And you said that was quite quiet.
Yeah, and that is quiet. Like, when you look at a hatch here, you're looking at maybe 20 flies within 10 foot of each other. That's how serious a hatch is.
What was surprising was all that fly we saw this morning, we saw 3 fish, if I remember right. There's 2 rows to your left, and that one which head and tailed in front of us. That was a sight to see.
Yeah.
So they obviously are either feeding on the nymphs, which I guess they are, and that's for your setup you were doing. You're at the die line, and you're fishing the team of nymphs, and you got 1 or 2, didn't you? Actually, 1 was on for a bit.
Yeah, one decided to test the rod, all right.
And then, but I stayed with the floater and pulling the wets, and I actually happened to have a double header, which doesn't happen very often, and they both came off. But apart from that, so we fished for a bit down there, and then the wind started to pick up, and it was changing direction. So we've motored up to the top end of the lake now, or the bottom end, you can say, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, this is where we'll stay now, in the lee shore for the spent.
Yeah.
You wouldn't fish the spent down the other end?
Oh, we would, yeah, but the wind is not going to give us that chance. What it'll do is that you can actually see boats down there at the minute, so it's pushing them at an angle. Really, what you would need is to stay out into the middle, because you're basically following the fly the whole way out. And with Sheelin being a very popular lake for anglers, a lot of the bigger fish and a lot of the fish will push out into the middle. So the whole idea is to stay out there. The fish feel more comfortable out there, which is a big thing as well. So most of our fishing out here at the minute, you're looking at about 6 to 7 meters where we're situated. The further we go down, or further we go up the lake, you're looking at 8 meters. 8 meters being the deepest part.
181, Finian Dodd, Lough Arrow.
I've seen a friend of mine still has a copy of a poster which was done for the local fishing club having their Mayfly competition. It was in the early 1970s anyhow, but it said annual Mayfly competition on Lough Arrow, June the 3rd. So you'd wait when picking the date. You'd do this at very short notice, of course, but you'd get the posters printed in the local printing press where they printed the local newspaper. You'd bang them up on poles round about, all done in the space of maybe a week. But you would wait until you knew that you were picking a very good Sunday, to hold your Mayfly competition. So the 3rd of June would have been probably the prime Sunday in the Mayfishing that year. Nowadays, we had Mayfly this year at the very last days of April, a nice little start of a hatch of Mayfly. When I was a youngster, that would never have been heard of. So the Mayfly has moved back certainly 3 weeks earlier now. We have no freezing of the lake for years and years. Can't remember when it happened. We've, the winters that we used to have, where you'd have, a couple of weeks anyhow of hard frost and that sort of thing. Yeah. That doesn't happen anymore. I've seen years ago, before the zebra mussel came to the lake and has left it, very clear. We don't like to see them in. We don't like invasive species, but they're in and they do filter water, so they have left us very, very clean water. But I remember before they came in, maybe 10, 15 years ago, been on the lake shore on a Christmas morning, and the sun was so bright that you could see the algae starting to form on the water because of the brightness of the sunshine. I mean, that, you go back 50, 60, 70 years ago, never heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed algae. You could see it yesterday
Yes.
in the water.
Yeah.
Something which I noticed last week, which was nice to see, which I haven't seen for a while. I was driving on the Glan Shore on the Corrib, and there was a house there beside the road, and it had a handwritten sign, Mayfly for sale.
Yes.
And, you know, I remember back in the early days when I used to come there, you know, and I know friends like my age, they said that for a week, they'd have a week off school.
Yes. Yeah.
And as they were earning some money, just selling,
Picking
collecting
mayflies.
mayfly. Would you
Yes.
do that around here?
No, that was never done around here. But the funny thing was that the mayfly on Lough Corrib, we had a very, very proficient hatch of mayfly, much more so than on the Corrib. The Corrib would get a much more scattered hatch. So picking mayfly on the Corrib took up, an hour or
Hit or
what
miss.
in the morning.
Yeah.
So if you were a fisherman and you had to waste an hour fishing, of fishing time picking mayflies, it was much easier to buy a dozen or 2 dozen mayflies from
Yeah.
some young urchin selling them to you, and just get on the water straight away. Here, you pick them off the bushes in minutes. You'd row out in the lake and just pop your net out, and you'd pull in enough of flies that would keep you going for the whole day in 5-10 minutes.
189, Melvin Wood. I was fishing just after your trip, I shared a boat with Kevin Sheridan.
Yes.
And he said, have you heard of the Melvin method, he said. And he told me about your big fish. It was a double, wasn't it?
It was.
So what was the story behind that then? You had a couple of days there, yeah?
I had probably 4 days in total there. Yeah, I had a day with Dominic Kerrigan as well.
All right.
Which was quite fruitful. I had a 10, a 7, a 4, and a 2.
And all on the Melvin method?
All on the Melvin method. So you want to know about the Melvin method?
Well, actually, you did tell me, and Kevin did on the day, when I fished with him.
Right.
But it's quite something, because all the last couple of seasons, nymph fishing is big out there, isn't it? It's probably been fishing. There are certain people who've been doing it for years, but for one reason or other, the last 2 seasons especially, everyone is fishing the mayfly nymph, and I can see why, because probably for every fish we see come up for a dry mayfly, there's probably 50 below taking nymphs.
Absolutely.
And I think the tactic is having confidence in doing what the certain method. And most people are fishing floating line, maybe a sink tip, midge tip. But you did something totally different, didn't you? You were a dive 5, is it?
Well, I was talking to you about this on the last podcast we did.
Yeah.
In the fishing in Ireland is changing. All you needed was a floating line 20 years ago. Well, that's not the case now. The fish don't seem to be as free rising as they were. I mean, there are times that they're free rising, but it's very, very rare that they are. Now, when we were on Sheelin this time, there were a lot of straight lining nymphs, as though they were buzzers, like fishing a buzzer.
Yeah.
Which is very popular on Corrib and Mask and other places. And most of the guys, well, I'm saying most of the guys, all of the guys who were fishing nymphs were fishing straight line and catching not much. There was the odd fella doing very well, but the majority of the men weren't. So I thought, well, really, it needs a bit of a different approach. So I went to my usual tactic of fishing booby on the point on a dye line, depending on the line weight, depending on how deep I was fishing over.
Yeah.
Booby on the point and 3 nymphs behind it. And if I weren't touching bottom, I wasn't in the right place. And all the fish were on the bottom, and all the fish came to the same fly, which was quite amazing. So yeah.
So you're fishing the washing line in effect.
It was a washing line.
On a sinking line. So you had 3 nymphs fishing.
3 nymphs and pull beyond the point.
But what I was fascinated with, the idea of, you're casting a long line, you're leaving it going right down.
Depending on how deep you were.
Yeah. But the takes, apparently, because when I did fish with Kevin, he was using this method, and he actually missed a couple, and he didn't actually hook any. Yeah. But when I was watching him, the line was vertical, and the tip would just go down, and he actually missed them. So I guess because it's to do with the nymph coming to the surface then, and I guess really the natural, it comes straight up, doesn't it? So that's what you're doing.
Yeah, it swims straight up. My fish took me right on the bottom. It wasn't on the lift when I was getting them. It was actually right on the bottom.
Oh.
And you certainly knew when you got a bite because it ripped your hand out. It's a proper hard bite. You wanted £10 nylon out. I said, smash it.
How did it fight? Did you know you had a good fish straight away?
Oh, yeah. Kevin sent me a video of it. Yeah, we knew. Yeah. Like I just turned to Kevin when I felt the fish. I said, Kevin, we're going to be here for some time.
We're going to need a bigger boat. Yeah.
But all due credit to Kevin. He put me over the fish. He knew where the fish were.
186, Niall Galston.
Well, compared to other years, I hadn't the best of Mayfly this year.
No,
last year was absolutely brilliant. I broke more records last year and got amazing bags last year. But this year, I only fished the Mayfly for because I'm fishing the first 2 weeks. I'm fishing buzzer on Corrib, and then the second 2 weeks, then I kind of come off the Corrib, even though there's fantastic Mayfly fishing to be done there. But I kind of concentrate in Sheelin, because I love it up there, and I love the fishing on it. You know yourself, the quality of fish that's in it. But I fished 4 days straight on Sheelin this year. I caught fish every day. I had lovely fish up to 7 pounds on the spent, a few 5-pounders on the nymphs. But there was one day in particular, I was fishing with Gene. Gene.
Gene Harron, yeah.
So I was fishing with him one day. I was all excited, lovely conditions, perfect for nymphing, the whole lot, and I was looking forward to a really good day. And my God, he gave me a ferocious hammer in the boat. He caught 9 fish and I caught 1. So after he caught the first 3 or 4 fish, because I'm very competitive, and so is Gene, and I was kind of trying to, and I'm always trying to learn, you see. I'm always trying to, understand what's going wrong, and, so.
What were you fishing, dries? Were you fishing dries?
No, we're fishing nymphs.
All right.
Nymphs up in Sheelin. So I was like, right, that's it now. I said, show me the length of your cast. So I put the length of the cast up to my cast. I measured it exactly the same. We had 3 of the exact same nymphs tied the exact same way in the same parts of the cast. So that ruled that out. We cast at the same distance at the same time, and a retrieve was the exact same time. So we were I was following him for an hour or 2, and he was still getting the takes, and I was like, oh Jesus, I don't know, I can't figure this one out. So yeah, that was my last day on Sheelin, and I couldn't get back to rectify it, but hopefully next year.
Did you use the same leader material?
Same leader material, frog hair. That's all we ever use is frog hair. I find it's the best there is. Yeah, I really stand behind it. It's like I've never ever had any issues with it. For Sheelin, I'd be using 8-pound frog hair though. I wouldn't be using 6.
Yeah, I got broke a couple of times actually on Sheelin. And I learnt my lesson. I'm a true believer. I love this. It's got Snowbee superfluorocarbon and it's 6.5. And up until I fished Sheelin, I would put money on it. I would land any fish, but they were breaking me. And I went on to Maxima then. And you wouldn't think, there's a big difference in it. I do love Maxima, to be honest. But it was, so next time I'll be sticking to maximum. But I haven't tried frog. A long time ago I used frog hair. I haven't used it for a while.
Yeah. Now, I don't use frog hair for dries, like for spent fishing or anything like that. I use straightforward green pound or 6 pound green maxima. I think it sits lovely into the water, not mudded. Yeah, and it has serious strength. To nearly pull a boat, it's that strong. But for the nymphs, always on Sheelin I go with 8 pound. And I've never broken a fish, thankfully. And I've full confidence in it. And I suppose that's half the battle.
184, Rob Connor.
But I would have learned an awful lot from Darren. Like, he's a very tactical fisher. Like, whereas I would be more sort of traditional. I'm happy enough just to go out there in a big wave and flog wets. But it was only when I started kind of fishing with him that I noticed, even in a big wave, he would still stick to fishing dries, and he was picking up fish. I remember actually the first day I was on Lough Corrib with him, and I suppose it's close to 10 years ago now, and we were fishing out by Saints Island. And for some of your guys that probably know Ree. And it was a nice bit of a wave on it. And of course, I was flogging away with my wets, and Darren set up dries. And I was thinking, what's this lad doing setting up dries? Because a lot of the time, the reef fish they're lazy as well. They don't tend to bother too much with the green fly. It's more of a spent lake, particularly as the Mayfly goes on. They just tend to. So, yeah, Jesus, after 15, 20 minutes, he fairly made me eat my words. He'd a fish about 4.5 pound a boat, came up and took a green wolf, and in a big wave and no sign of rising fish. Jesus took him on the blind. So, yeah, and I saw that in the Corrib last year as well. Lads catching really good fish, particularly in the July hatch, the Mayfly. Just fishing blind. And they might only see 5 Mayfly for the day, but they stick up a couple of dry Mayflies and fish away, It's it can be tedious if it's very slow, and if you don't hit a couple of fish maybe in the first few hours, maybe you're as well off changing to wets or something. But
I found that
it definitely does work.
I found that often with various hatches. When there's less fly, often you catch more fish. Doesn't necessarily show, because there's less competition there, I suppose. Don't have to take you a fly.
And maybe think any fish that is up, he's searching and he's actually actively feeding, and he needs to go looking for it. Like, whereas, as you say, in a big hatch, they're too finicky. Like,
and you mentioned then the wolf. Do you know what? The last 2 seasons, I wouldn't say it was almost forgotten, but people were using a lot more modern patterns the last few seasons. But this season and last year, a lot of people talking about fishing a wolf, and you said the same.
Yeah, like Wayne Carberry there, another friend of mine. He's from sort of North Longford. He's a big Lough Corrib man. He fishes Lough Key and those sort of Shannon lakes. But he had a saying, and it's very true. I think that once the fish get a taste for spent, they don't really want to bother with much else. I think. A grey wolf there is very generic, and I think it's it could be taken for either, but particularly obviously the spent, and it seems to ride up well in the water, and the fish like it, So So I don't know. It's just I suppose you have to fish wherever you have confidence in, and I just have confidence in that fly, But I have experimented and I have tried. Now, one thing I do find with the wolf, if you have a pin ripper or a flat cam, it's probably not the best choice. I think it sits a bit high in the water. Yeah. And I think sort of flat-winged spent can be a better option then. Yeah. But I think if you've any sort of a ripple at all, like even last night now when I went out first and I had that decent lump of a fish, I just a bog standard grey wolf on then. I just have confidence in it, and I think that's the key to it as well, isn't it,
180, Dave Egan. You saw plenty of fly today. It sounded like the old days, because I remember back when I used to come, like the early years. I used to go from Kong then, and you always remember the good times, but I remember dirty days like today. And then you're fishing, and it was always around 11 o'clock you'd get this hatched in. Yeah. And then you'd see these greens coming past you, and I haven't experienced that for a while, really.
Well, I knew that today was going to be a bumper day, because I had been here Sunday, and while there was fly coming off, it was just baking hot. And
Oh, it's terrible, wasn't it?
yeah, it was crazy. What a day to choose to bring my son to try and get him encouraged into coming to the Corrib more often. You know, he got a grade 10. That was about it, you know. But today, one thing I noticed at about 4:30, the mayfly stopped hatching, but there was fish feeding on the water, and I said, I need to figure out what they're taking. And then I saw it, like the most fluorescent yellow, I guess they were yellow sallies.
Yeah.
Like one of them landed on my arm, and I gently got him by the wings and overturned him. If you remember the fly that tucks indispensable,
Yeah.
it's like the pink.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, the intensity of the pink under his thorax was just
Really?
Yeah, it was unnatural, and the fish hammered him on the water.
Did you put anything like that on?
Yeah, I tried to put on a yellow booby. No, I put a golden olive bumble, but it wasn't fluorescent enough. You know,
Yeah.
this was just one of those colours of nature.
You don't get those at the lakes, though, do you? They're unknown to me.
I saw him on Sunday, and I saw him again today, and the fish were picking him out in that massive blow.
Where I've seen them a lot is on the Cong River. I remember one year they were coming out of these rocks, and it was a race between the trout taking them and the birds.
The birds, yeah. Well, the trout won today. They were picking them out, and it got really dirty, and it got cold, and it rained. It rained so heavy, and those little flies were hatching. And I actually stopped fishing. I was admiring them, trout being taken,
Really?
having feasts on them.
I might head out tomorrow night.
That's 2 days in a row now I've seen trout feasting on them, and they were distinctly picking them out.
179, Lough Corrib. I headed out about 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock. And you know what? On my first drift, I had 2 fish. Now, that can be a good sign or a bad sign, because sometimes when you pick too soon, it could go downhill then. It has a little bit gone downhill, but it's because of the weather, really, not because of anything else. But I set up with 2 dries. Most people say, the Mayfly is just starting, and I think they're right as well. But today, I'm not in a rush to fish, because I've had a great week. So, as I said, I pulled onto the island. I made a fire now, and I'm going to have a bite to eat in a minute before I do some fishing, because it's absolute. There's not a cloud in the sky, and they say only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. Well, I don't think there's much point fishing just yet, anyway. But going back to Friday, last Friday, as I said, I went out. The conditions were good, cloudy, a nice, I wouldn't say a big wave, but a reasonable wave going across the bay. So I decided to stay in Portacarran. And to be honest, I've had so much success there over the years, I don't see any point, any need to leave there. And this was the case this day as well, the first day, because I ended up having 6 fish and met a few others, missed straws, plucked a few, and the biggest one I would say is about 3 1/4 or thereabouts. Now, there's a saying, you never know it all, you always keep learning. Now, there was something which I learnt, and that is, on the first drift, as I said, I had 2 fish, and they were close to Inishcash. There's one of the islands on the edge of Portacarran. And I've always known, and this is always the fact I have found, that when you're fishing close to islands, you're drifting close to islands, more often than not, you get the smaller fish. So it was nice to just kick off. I thought, just get a fish under your belt. And this is what happened. I set up with 2 dries, and as I motored out into the bay, I could see the odd mayfly coming, blowing past me in the wind, which gives me a lot of encouragement then. And it's always that, it's a wonderful feeling to see your first one of the season. You can't help but smile. And the anticipation then, on what's ahead. So I set up with these 2 dries, and I drifted along this Inishcash. And straight away, I had one about a pound, just over a pound, 1 1/4 maybe, something like that. And that took the point fly. And it was a confident rise, so that was good. And then I missed a couple of fish. and they were the splashy rises. What I mean splashy rises, you get the confident rise in a wave where you get a little dimple or a sup. More often than not, they stick. But when they splash in a thrash and a fly, 50-50, a lot of the time you don't catch them. Now, and what I have found, the reason for this is the fly is sitting too high in the water. So then, now the 2 flies which I put on, as normal, I would gink them up to get extra buoyancy, to make sure, especially in a wave. And I was finding I was missing a few fish. So I did have one then, shortly after about 3 or 4 mistakes. And this was a great fish, this was about £2. So I was confident. So after the first drift, I thought, right, let's go back round again, do the same drift. Slightly further out this time. Because what I have found, close to the island, as I said, you get the smaller fish. And the further you go out into the open water, then I seem to get the better fish. So the next drift I go around, instead of fishing sort of 10-15 yards along the shore, I went about 30-40 yards off the shore. So I went back round again, and I missed another fish, and they were splash, splash. It's only the point fly was actually getting the offers. So I took then the dropper off, the detached body mayfly. Now, what I didn't do this time, I did intentionally. I didn't put any gink on the dropper, and that's because I didn't want it to be fishing too high. And then I started fishing again, and I missed fish again on the point, So I took the point fly off and put a dry version without no gink on the point. So at this stage now, I'm fishing 2 dries, untreated. So after a few casts, they get wet and waterlogged. But that's okay, because what you find is, when you're fishing dries, the flies aren't on the water 15 seconds. You know, when you're fishing dries, it's just you're covering fish, and usually fish will take in the first 5 to 10 seconds when you're fishing dries. You're covering fish, or they just hit the water, and a fish notice it, and up they come. There's no point leaving the fly any longer. So so by not treating the fly, what I'm actually doing is fishing them more in the film before they sink, and what a difference that made. Because during the next couple of hours, I had another 3 fish, all on the point again, and they were more confident. They were just dimples, just gentle rises, bang, everyone stuck. So that was the key thing. They didn't want it up high in the wave. 151, Mike Bunn, Lough Sheelin.
It was easy to wet fly fish, because, but dry fly fishing, no one did it. And what happened with the Lough Sheelin episode was, that morning I felt so embarrassed. For a start, I'm looking at this vast sea of a lake, about 7 miles long or something, and look at this armada, all the men with their big engines and their boat, all going into the distance. I felt impotent. I had a boat, good new boat, no engine, no boatman, I had my food, but I felt totally empty because I'd only just arrived, so it was on the agenda that I was going to have a boatman and an engine the next day. And but as it so happened, it was a blessing in disguise, because as I came out of the Innie, everyone had gone off to Church Island. That was where I heard them saying, and I could see it was miles away. It was like in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And so I just turned right, and it was a nice day. It was not sunny. There was no strong wind, right? So I felt quite comfortable rowing. No engine, remember? And so I rowed for about half a mile or a mile, whatever it was. And the closer I got, I could see the gulls taking. I could see them in front. Mayfly, dry mayfly off this.
It's exciting to see that for the first time. Great to see that, isn't it?
But I'm really pleased. The night before that, this man Terry Jur, Commander Jur, retired. He was showing me these long-shanked, quite crude-looking, big hooks, long, but the hackle was tied in the middle of the hook. And the idea was, when you cast it out, it was
Sit in the film.
but slightly down as
Yeah.
I was hatching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was, because, you know, I'd never cast a dry fly, remember that. And I had a Ritz Farrier, beautiful 8'5" split cane rod, Pezon Michel, and a silk line, forward taper number 5, which you waxed. There was no such thing as Cortland lines in those days. You know, if they were just around the corner. And anyway, I just rode into this little bit of calm water. It was kind of greyish. There was sun-ish. And I couldn't fucking believe it. I saw this, and it did it again. So I little practice cast that way, and then my very first cast with a dry fly in my life, a magnificent trout of 3.5 pounds.
Wow.
Arch chrome, beautiful brown and black spots on it in pristine condition. I couldn't believe it, you know. First cast. Then about 10 minutes later, when I had the boat there and the fish there, I put it in the boat, you know, dried the fly again. It's all new to me, remember. Do you know what I dried it with? A piece of Amadou.
Well, they sell it now, don't they? Yeah,
What?
yeah. Amadou, yeah.
Well, that's what you had in those days.
Yeah, Amadou, yeah.
And anyway, about 10 minutes later, I could smell wood smoke. You know, I just smelt it anyway, just something I noticed. Just like when I was talking about the coarse fishing, I smelt there was a smell of coarse fishing.
Yeah.
And I just saw another fish come up. It was my second cast, because I'd got the first one, but it was my first cast at this fish that I saw rising twice. I got it. It was exactly the same size as the other one, in mint condition. And it got a bit quiet then, you know. I mean, just a bit, I got two fucking beautiful fish in dry fly. I felt like peacock. I felt like I was top of the top rod in the King's Road.
Yeah.
Remember, this is all new to me, so I was becoming like a stealth bomber. I knew that by being discreet and quiet, I was totally cocooned in this little oasis. And I went round, it was quiet for about another half hour. There weren't as many flies hatching, but when I went round and this other little things, the water was a tiny bit more wavy, like cordial, simply because I was feeling some of the onshore wind off the main lake. And another fish, and I think I had 2 casts at this one. Must have been the same fish, because it was coming. Anyway, I got that as well. It was exactly the same. They were all exactly 3.5 pounds. Magnificent. And I heard this. I saw you catch all 3 of those. Well done. The man, this wood smoke, was a man just settling for his lunch, and he was just making his tea. And in those days, you had a big black kettle, you boiled it, and you chucked a big fistful of tea into it. You know, and they say when it was thick enough and strong enough to trot a mouse on, it was ready for drinking. And it was very good, because he used a bit of gorse. Like when he said, have a cup of tea. Remember, virgin territory for me.
135, Ted Werry. This is perfect conditions now, though, isn't it? Obviously, we've got the sun, mine which isn't the best.
Yes.
But the wind, it's a nice soft wind, isn't it?
It is, lovely soft wind. It's been up to the start of this week, we've never had a proper wind. It's always been a gusty, very, very cold wind, and it scatters along the surface top. And I think in Northern Ireland they call it the devil's breath. But I've never had any success with a dry fly when you've got a surface on the lake like that.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, the refraction that puts the fish down, they can't work out what's happening on the top, I don't know. But I've had no success like that.
Well, 2 days ago I came out for a few hours when I arrived, and I just went out, and it was a big wind, but I don't mind a big wind, I love a big wind, but is that scurrying, you know,
That's
when
it.
it flattens the water.
It does.
You see that dark water. And
It
it's
does.
like, but there wasn't a great deal of fish showing or fly. I managed to pull 3, which were just coming off the islands.
Yeah.
But yesterday, I saw more hatching, and last night, the amount of flies. So hopefully, now, we might catch it now they're starting, perhaps.
Well, I hope so. Because what has hatched, it's been sparse, and some days it's there, some days it's not. It's never. You just got that feeling it's not actually got going properly yet.
Yeah.
But as you say, you can't beat the big soft rolling wave. It's ideal fishing then.
Yeah. It's never really been a spent water, has it?
No.
Even though they get a lot of fly.
No, it hasn't. Well, whether it's... I've never seen the fly go out in numbers. I mean, it obviously does go out, and I've caught on spent, but it's not a place you would...
Yeah.
If you were looking for spent fishing, you wouldn't book your holiday to come to the Corrib for spent. You'd want to be Derg or Sheelin.
Yeah.
I mean, Sheelin's just phenomenal. There's that many spent you can nearly walk on them.
Now, when you're fishing the spent on like Sheelin, would you still be looking around the islands, or could be anywhere on the lake?
They could be anywhere on the lake. They could be anywhere. Obviously, you're always going to have fish round the islands.
Yeah.
But there is that much spent on Sheelin, you just don't know where to expect to fish. They could be anywhere.
Yeah. It's funny, a number of times I've been drifting on the boat, trying to pull the odd fish, and you might get 1 or 2, difficult days. But yesterday, I went out trawling, but when I went for lunch on one of the islands up by Duras there, the amount of fly and fish rising around the islands.
Yeah.
You think sometimes you just as well just park the boat on one of the islands, island hopping, looking for fish.
That's right. That's exactly what we did yesterday. I mean, I'd got 2 rods set up. I'd got one with a Mayfly on and a spent, and I had a 9-foot with a single fly on, with a small sedge pattern on, because when you did find fish on the islands, they weren't all taking the same thing. You could tell by the rises that they were varying. There were some fish there that was taking the small sedge. There was others that was taking the Mayfly, and I had 3 fish come to the dun and didn't take it, and I changed it and put another spent on, and they never refused it. And you think, well,
that's interesting. That
it is, yeah.
At May time, you think that they feed on Mayfly just because you see a fish rise, but it's not necessarily the case.
No, absolutely not.
35, Mark Roberts, entomology.
And then they develop from the nymphal stage to emerging, and some different species emerge differently to others. And it's them recognising how they're emerging and when they're emerging. They form into the dun, which is the adult fly, which is quite often a little bit duller. It's got more colour in the wing, and that is known as well as dun. It's subimago, and then they'll get off the river and they take shelter in trees or bushes, and they'll go through another metamorphosis and change from duns to spinners, where they become more clear and see-through, and then they mate in the air in what's known as a spinner dance, quite often seen with traditional Danica vulgata, which is the traditional mayfly, known from Duffer's Week, but all the flies do it, and you'll see a mass of them dancing together up and down over the river, and the females then go back to the river, lay their eggs, and some species will crawl down rocks and crawl down weeds into the river, and will sow their eggs close to the margins. Others will float over the top, and those are obviously what the fishermen are interested into. They lay their eggs, and then they just die on the top, and the fish quite often just suck in the spinners spent because it's an easy meal. None of them are actually born with mouth parts, so they can't eat.
That's where they only last 12 hours or thereabouts, they say.
Well, 24 hours in actual fact.
All right.
And the spinners, I mean, people saying, it's quite funny in the summer. I've been coming back to the car at 6 o'clock in the morning when people are arriving nice and early, and they're going there to fish for early emergers before the heat of the day gets up. Yet they've missed the best hatch from sunrise, which early summer would be about 3 in the morning, right, when the spinners are falling and laying their eggs, particularly from a balmy night, and you can have some tremendous sport between 3:30 and 5:30 when it's all finished. Go back, have a cup of tea, and get the rest of your day done.
28, Mark Regan.
Again, people thought it was wind up. You discovered that the salmon take, and they take so well, both at dusk and at dawn. And he used to go out in Oughterard Bay at absolutely first light. He'd be out in the dark during the mayfly, zapping mayflies with a sole purpose of getting a salmon or two. And often he did. And up near Kong as well, he'd be dapping mayflies, but he'd be dapping them at dawn, and he'd dap them again in the evening for the salmon. And then in between, if he was out in the lake, he'd go off and he'd fish the usual drift for trout. But he always reckoned that first thing in the morning was great. And he was right. The first thing in the morning is.
Yeah, for salmon, isn't it?
I fish. Oh, it's unbelievable because I fished there down in Bangareras, Carramore Lake. Really one of my favourite spots. I don't get fish enough because it's a long way away from here. But, the spring salmon fishing, right, even the summer salmon fishing is amazing. But dawn and dusk really are the very, very best times,
Yeah.
It's such a concentration it takes at those times,
Yeah. You were saying about this guy when he was on the island and trying to get these buzzers on his hook.
Yeah.
I remember I've had a few fish over the years when I've gone in for lunch on an island and you're sitting down and you're looking at out across the lake and you see the odd fish rise, and it's surprising how much it's overlooked, isn't it, to fish off an island?
It is. It should be done more because that's where fly congregates, really.
Yeah. This one day I was trolling, and I mentioned this the other day that
Yes.
I usually either troll or fly. I never take both gear, too much stuff. But this one particular day I had a fly rod with me, and I was trolling in the morning, and I had 2 fish which came off. So anyway, I went into the island then. It was by Caneva. And I sat down and moored the boat, and I was still sitting in the boat. I had a cup of coffee and a Kit Kat, and all of a sudden, plop, plop, plop. There's 1 or 2 fish moving. I mean, within 20 foot of the shore.
Yeah.
And it was quite a bit of a drop off, actually. You went quite deep. And I kept watching, and there were mayfly coming off, and they'd been blown on the water. There was like a flotilla of them, and they were just coming past. So I hastily then put up the fly rod. I only had some wets with me, I did, so I greased up the wets. There's a Lough Corrib mayfly and a grey partridge, and I greased them up, and then I just flicked it out, a short cast, and cut long story short, within 25 minutes, half hour, I had 3 fish, biggest one, 7.5, just under 7.5. 157, Darren Duffy.
Fish hadn't switched on to spent or anything like that yet, so I think it was around 10 to 5.
Something which I was amazed at was a photograph you sent to me yesterday of the Mayfly nymph, the natural, and they had like these lilac-coloured, quite vivid breathers. I've never seen that. Do you actually tie your patterns with the lilac in it, or is this just something new you've come across?
So I saw that this year, that photo with some chap put it up on Facebook there, and like you, I was shocked. I was like, I didn't think they had that kind of colouring at all. I thought they were just drab old things. So I saw that lilac, and I did tie Mayfly with lilac in behind the thorax then, and I had some good fish on them. I actually had that big fish on one where it was lilac, but it wasn't. It was like a light bright material, so it was like lilac light bright material, but it wasn't very garish or anything like that. So I just tied those in as kind of hot spots in behind the thorax, and it worked. The lilac one worked. Actually, some of the best takes I got were actually on that lilac one, and I don't know, is there anything to do with that, or is it just a coincidence? But I had some with different colour hot spots, and the lilac one definitely got me the most vicious takes. So
I have to tie some of those up. I'll have to give them a try next year, even on Corrib even. Maybe they're different of some waters, but it'd be good to see.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. No, like I said, I was absolutely shocked when I saw them because like the Mayfly nymphs I'm normally seeing is in May, and it's just a shock, so you see them hatching, but I've never seen that like that, so I don't know, it's just that they were juveniles, for want of a better word, or whether it's just that they were, like I said, whether it's just that they're on Corrib or the area, the lake they're living in, I don't know, but
do you know what,
definitely cool.
Yeah, do you know what I'm thinking as well? Like when you're fishing your dries, you're catching a few fish, and because we're all catching a release now, you're catching a few fish, maybe 3-4 fish a day. It could be a good day. You put the fish back, and they're not spooned. You don't really know what they're feeding on. They might have just come for that dry. They might have been just gorging, full of Mayfly nymphs before. Like, that's the thing when you catch and release. You don't really know what they've been feeding on.
No, definitely. And like that, I know a lot of friends of mine, very few people spoon fish, even when they do kill them, very few people spoon them. I think we just it's definitely overlooked there. You're taking it for granted that if he took a dry Mayfly that he was feeding on dry Mayfly, like you said, he couldn't feed on nymphs and just came up and took that for whatever reason. And it's definitely something worth thinking about. But I think that especially on Sheelin, they definitely gorge, and this year they were definitely gorged on Mayfly nymphs because the lads that knew what they were doing nymphs and had bumper days, and then the lads that were sticking to the traditional wets and dries, they were picking up 1 or 2 fish sure, but like there was lads on Sheelin this year that had a dozen fish a day or more
really?
On nymphs. Yeah, and like even like that, you get a lot of good takes. You have a lot of taps and stuff too, so you meet a lot more fish. So it's definitely it was definitely the method this year, now like that. It might be next year. We were last year, I think the year before, we went up to Sheelin in the start of May and rented the boat out from the fishery board just above. What's the name of the bay there? Just where the fishery board is. Anyway, we went out from there. Just started the drift, and like that, I had two dry mayflies up from like a 20-foot leader. So I took off the mayflies and flicked them up to the water, pulled out the line, and next minute, God was then he pulled out of my hand. A trout took straight out. The boat was still drifting across. We hadn't even stopped drifting, and I hooked the fish and played them out. And I had them at the back of the boat. The fish were 4 pound and lost them. And I turned to my friend. I said, it's either we're going to have a bumper day or we're not going to meet another fish for the rest of the day. But finished out that drift. I think we got 2 fish on that drift, and then there was an all-merciful hail shower, thundering lightning on the lake and the whole lot. I actually made my friend take me off the lake. It was probably one of the first times he said get me off the lake because the lightning was coming right across the lake, and we pulled into a little boat shed there, and the lightning hit a tree.
Did it?
20 foot away. Yeah, about 20 foot away from us, and I said I can do it. And I just go like
you're safer in the boat.
yeah. So the hail stopped, everything stopped, and we went back out, and it was cold, and there was just millions of mayflies stuck to the water. And I said to my friend, I said, it's either game over or they're going to switch on here. It's one or the other. I said, we'll just wait and see. And sure enough, a couple of minutes in, a fish started to rise, and another fish started to rise, and another fish started to rise, and all rising close to the shore. And to cut a long story short, anyway, I finished up that day with 11 trout to the boat. My friend had 10 to the boat, all on dry maize. And yeah, just one of those days, they just absolutely switched on after the hail shower. I think it was to do with the duns were just stuck to the water and they just couldn't go anywhere, so the trout just knew. Like, we were getting fish that night at like 10 o'clock in the pitch black on greens, we call them, I suppose. It was actually a little ginger wolf that I tied up. It's actually in that fly fishing journal. It was on that ginger wolf, but it was like 10 o'clock at night, and the trout were still coming to these fly that were just stuck around the water. So, yeah, definitely that day I wouldn't have liked the nymphs on that day. They were definitely on the duns that day.
If you're enjoying this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you get weekly podcasts and access to over 200 episodes. To subscribe, visit patreon.com/casting with Ceri Jones. And those of you who are interested in joining me for a day on the lake, on the Corrib, I still have some weekday availabilities this month. Message me for more info. 45, James Barry.
I have some friends who fish Sheelin quite a bit, and Sheelin came on my radar maybe 3 years ago now, and they invited me up to try the Mayfly, and I jumped on the opportunity, went over, fished with the guys, And we had some good fishing. There was, all dry fly stuff, 6 weights, casting to rising fish. I absolutely loved it. And I said, right, this has to be something that I'm going to do annually. So I've been going back since, excluding COVID year last year. I've been there every year since. And this year we went up, and the spent knot coming off were just, it was incredible.
Was it?
The sight on one of the evenings, there was a kind of a breeze blowing over our shoulders, and we were fishing into this bay. I don't lie to you, Ceri, there was thousands and thousands. There was no end to the mayfly that were coming off.
Really?
But the trout were kind of staying down for whatever reason. I don't know the ins and outs of Sheelin as well as others that fish it all the time, but we didn't see a lot of fish rising that evening. I'm sure the locals will be able to tell you why, or maybe the wind was in the wrong direction or something like that. But
yeah,
it just wasn't. It just kind of felt like it was building. You're just waiting for this almighty bang of trout to explode on the surface and start feeding like crazy, but it never really happened.
wow.
And this spent fishing in the evening time was really, really difficult. And we actually had the one good fish in the morning. We got up at silly o'clock, 4 a.m. I think, and we headed out. There was actually a funny story behind it. The engine wouldn't start on the boat, so you obviously get down to your boat, you're ready to go, you're looking out on the lake, and we go to pull the engine, no go out of the engine. So I was just annoyed over the top of the boat, and my friend that was with me, Jason, said, "Oh look, I'll just row us over to this bay, and we'll give it a go." And at this stage, I was sitting up top. I was just annoyed, the engine not working.
Yeah.
Ready to go back to the B&B and just say, that's it, enough of this. But Jason, thankfully, anyway, rowed us over to the little bay. And as we were approaching, or probably 100 yards out, we could just see, I was sitting up the top, we could see this fish just sipping behind an island. And I shouted back to Jason, I said, yeah, I think I see something here. Yeah. And sure enough, we kind of rowed up onto this island, really nice and stealthy, actually. Now that I look back at it, it probably helped us a bit that the engine didn't start.
Yeah.
And it's just sipping away. And I just set up the fly, waited for the fish to come up. Textbook stuff, just drop the fly beside where he came up. And sure enough, he just came up and had it. And then all hell broke loose. It was just almighty battle. And he was just such a pretty fish.
Wow.
And yeah, definitely one I won't forget in a while. Just great buzz. Just food for the fly fishing soul up there in Mayfly time. It's great fun.
Yeah. Well, it must have been a blessing, really, that the engine didn't work.
That's it, everything, all these things happen for a reason, as they say. Yeah.
Did you get it to work after?
I was messaging Jason saying that all I need is a bit of sunshine on the engine there. Will heat it up a bit. And sure enough, when the sun came up and hit it, it was fine. One turn of the engine had started, and we headed off then, but we actually didn't catch that for the rest of the morning.
67, Dominic Kerrigan.
Well, the way sort of my fishing will be at the start of the year. I'd go out March time now. I'll probably go to Erin this year, March, April time, and I'll fish the shallows and if I maybe wait to see what comes out in the line of the olives. May time I don't actually fish wet flies during the mayfly at all. Not because I'm a purist or nothing else. All I'll fish is dries for the simple reason, I'm pulling wets the whole time, and I'd nearly sooner go out a day in blank on dries, which has happened more than once, than pull wets and get fish, because I just like that thing of just about fishing dries and fishing at the rays and fish, and focusing on a fish and catching that one fish. You have to spend 20 minutes or 2 hours after them, maybe watching them feed up and down a shore and make your move. And that's what I enjoy. You mightn't get a big pile of fish at it, but it's thoroughly enjoyable for me. And then once the mayfly is over, June can be a kind of a sort of a dog time. Fishing can be very much hit and miss in the lochs in June. You do get a hatch of mayfly out the Erin and them lakes.
You say in Erin, all the other waters you mentioned are fish, but I've never been to Erin. Is that a good mayfly water?
Erin's a fantastic mayfly water. Was tough the year. It was very, very tough this year. There was lots of fly on it. Fish were hard come by. The spent fishing was really good. I had some real good fishing on the spent, so I did plenty of fish. But again, it was tricky out conditions. You had a lot of flat, calm water, really flat, calm. So it sort of meant you were parking up. You had to be really cautious in your approach. You're now sitting waiting for the fish to come to you, because the slightest movement in the boat, that they've seen that much. The slightest ripple coming off a bad cast or anything like that will put them down.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. So they are very, very spooky fish. But the spent fishing on air now was great the year, but it was cold. It was a massively cold year. And when I looked, you had your jacket and your jumper on nearly every day you were out at the green fly. You had a neck warmer on most days. It was hard. Now there was days it was good, but on the whole, I would have said it was a hard mayfly. Definitely a hard mayfly.
Yeah, I found it's a funny thing, mayfly, when I'm fishing on the Corrib even, you could have this fly around, but there's no fish up, and you think, well, something's not right now. But I think it's to do with the wind myself, and I think if you get consistency, no matter what direction the wind is, I think you can have a north wind, easterly, whatever. I think what I've learned is, like, if you get like a few days of it, the trout will get onto it then. But if you get like easterly one day, westerly another day, then it's just like the fly around, but the fish won't feed, like I found.
Yeah, that was nearly, an exact explanation of the way it was the year. You were blowing east maybe for a day or two, and then all of a sudden you'd change to a westerly. And it was back and forth like that. You were drifting down past an island on Monday. You went there Tuesday. You were drifting up past the same island. You were going totally the opposite way on it.
194, Keith McDonnell.
Well, I managed to, I suppose it was 7 or 8 days on the trot. I had my missus driven mad because I was just, all into this thing to try and get the really big one. And eventually I came upon him and hooked him, and he came off. So I stood, like, the kind of fishing it is where you're doing a lot of kind of walking and hanging around and just waiting for things to come right, for the wind to drop, the spent to go out, and the fish to move. And there was a load of swans hanging around me. And, when you're standing there for a couple of hours waiting for things to happen, the swans were driving me insane.
Yeah. So where was this?
Well, it's
on the river.
On the river, yeah. It's a river. Just put a lot of time into it with my pal Kieran, kind of narrowing it down, and have found some really good fish. But it's one thing to find them. The rest of the stuff has to line up too. But anyway, so. Yeah, the swans are driving me crazy. And then things came right, and I hooked this big fish, and I lost him fairly quickly. I was gutted. And so I hung around there for a couple of evenings afterwards, just waiting for him to come back. Yeah. And eventually he started feeding, and, the way you get really excited. And I fluffed the first cast, and because I was so close to him, I was stuck. I was stuck in the grass on the bank, so I had to pull that out, leave the fly there, retie, right? And he was going absolutely, what I say, bickies. He was really taking a lot of fly. Got the fly tied on with shaky hands, etc., and was just about to cast. And 6 swans landed right on top of the fish and started fighting. The bit I left out about it was that there was one fucker of a swan, the male swan. You see, this seemed to be an argument between two families of swans, and so the lone male swan, he got left behind, and he actually even followed me all the way down the river on the way out. It was like a kick in the bollocks. But then, so 2 weeks later, there was a drop of water, and I decided I'd try for it last try for a springer, and I got the springer really cool fish, maybe 9 pounds, lovely shaped fish.
Nice.
And I was setting up, as I was describing to you, setting up on my own, and all of a sudden there's a swan in the frame. If you look, I think I put the picture up on Instagram or whatever, but the fucking swan stayed in the frame, like for about 9 shots of this salmon, you know, he was just sitting behind me. I was like, Jesus Christ, what's going on with the swans then? They're fuckers. They're a pain in the arse. But that's fishing, isn't it?
85, Corrib Mayfly. And it was. I start the drift. Short line in. Gee, I wouldn't have even thought I was casting 15 yards. Just lift and cast. And what I found when you're fishing dries, you don't leave the dries for a long time on the water, because 9 times out of 10, my experience, the fish will always come in the first few seconds. But the first 10, 15 seconds or so, at least, you know. And if they don't come then, lift off, false cast and out again. Keep casting, keep moving, because you want to be landing those flies on fish and they come up and take. And it's always the case. Always be ready when those flies land, because that's the time when those fish are going to take. It wasn't long, probably about 20 minutes or so. I was going down the drift, casting, lift, cast again, and all of a sudden there was a splashy take, you know. I lifted, and yes, I thought, I'm in. And it was a fish, played hard, played round the boat, went under the boat, and for his size, he fought really, really good. And eventually netted the fish, and I'd estimated a good solid 2.5 pound. I took some photographs. Really golden trout it was, you know. Typical of what you'd expect in a sandy bay. So, after taking a photograph, quick film of him being released, and off he went. Made up. And that settles you then, doesn't it? There's nothing worse than fishing. You can't settle unless you've had a trout in the boat. So then I knew I was doing the right thing. And the funny thing was, even though I had the 2 dries on, they're exactly the same. The size 12s they are, detached bodies. It was the point fly it took. So anyway, I carried on the drift, and then nothing for a while, for about, I don't know, half hour or so. And now I'm drifting across the open water as a big bay, and you're drifting over yellow water into dark water, and yellow water and dark water. And then, but there wasn't a lot of fly around. So anyway, I kept on drifting. Next thing, a tiny dimple. Lift, same again. Acrobatic this time. Leapt and just around the boat, and eventually, after a hard battle, stayed down deep, came to the net, and again, another 2.5 pounder. Now, normally, very often on the day, there's hard days when you're out on the lake where a brace of fish you'd be well chuffed. And I was happy, but I had an idea there was more going to be coming my way. Now, I carried on the drift, instead of going all the way back round again, because very often, especially back home when you're fishing for rainbows, you hit a few fish, the first thing you do then is go back around and do that drift again. Not necessarily here. I would normally just carry on drifting, because very often the case, you go back around and you don't really hit a lot of fish the second drift round. So, because they're a lot more spookier, these trout, you know. But again, no real sign of any mayfly. And time was getting on. I actually started the day, it must have been about 2:15 I went out. Quite late, with the plan of just going out for a few hours. So now, it was probably about 4 o'clock. And 2 fish in the boat, I thought, great. So then, the wave was picking up now. And ahead of me and to the left is an island. And I can't remember it, to be honest now, the name of it. But I wanted to drift alongside the island. So if you can imagine, I'm drifting, I'm on my own. I've got the oar at the back. And what I was doing, I was casting. And every now and again, I'd give a couple of pulls on the oar to pull me over nearer each time, instead of drifting down and past it. I wanted to fish along it. So I'd cast, and then I'd give 1 or 2 pulls on the oar, so I was going across the wind. And I kept doing this for, 5-10 minutes. And then there was one spot then, which was drifting onto the island, I would say probably about, it's a good distance out, 60-70 yards from the island. I cast, I swapped my rod to my left hand, and then I grabbed the oar, and I gave 1 or 2 pulls. And as I pulled, I could see one of those, was that a fish? You weren't quite sure, So I lifted the rod with my left hand, bang, all of a sudden, it was into this acrobatic fish. Never seen anything like it. Spinning around in the air, slapping his tail, screaming offline. And I thought, what a fish this was. So quickly then I swapped my hands. Played it to my right hand then to get some more control. This fish just screamed off. Taking the line which I had loose in the boat, onto the reel, screamed off, probably about 25-30 yards. I thought, this is a special fish. And this time I played him for a long time. I would say a good 10 minutes before around the boat he came up to the surface, and I slipped the net under, and then she went. What a fish. I estimate between 5.5 and 6 pounds. One of my better fish from the Corrib. A very bronzy looking fish, not quite as yellow as the others. So I was over the moon. Now the difference in this in the type of fish that you're getting in this bay, I was told this, is there's fish that are resident of the bay, and they are the yellow ones, the really bright yellow golden fish. And there's other fish, like this Pacific one which I caught now, was more bronzy, distinct difference to the other fish. Now these are fish which come in from the open water into the bay just to feed during mayfly time. And there is a difference in the markings. So this was just one of those fish. Probably it'd be living outside of the islands, and then come mayfly, come into the shallows and looking for a good feed. So after a few pictures, slipping over the back of the boat, held him there for a while, and then off he went to fight another day. 84 Corrib lunch, Colin Follen. And the thing is, I've spoken to a few people this week actually regarding dapping, and they've all said, every one of them, they don't use floss. But the thing is, the concentration is intense then. Because it's like you're like watching your dry fly even, If you're watching your dapping fly, and then something catches your eye, you look away, it's hard then to get focused back where your fly is. At least with a floss, it can direct you, can't it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you now, you see, you said to me this morning there on the lake that you don't like to leave the dries too long in the water. Look at the seagull coming down now to take the bit of fat off the steak I threw out. Look at him there. Isn't he as brazen? But anyway, I was fishing Monday.
He's still around. He's waiting for mine now.
Yeah, no, he can smell. He can smell the fat of the steak there in the hedges. Go on, we won't shoot you. But I remember fishing down at Rabbit Island one day, and I'd finished gillying for the day. My people went in at lunchtime, and I had the rod set up on my boat with 3 dry flies on it, and I had a dapping rod in the boat as well. And I said, just for pig iron, I said I'd do a drift to fish the 2 rods at the same time, you see. So in the left hand, I put the live mayflies on the dap out in front of me, maybe 15 yards, just nice and comfortable. And then I set up my dry fly rod with 3 wolves on it, and maybe casting 10 yards of line, and just thrown out in front of me. So I'm fishing 2 rods at the same time, artificials and natural mayflies. And all you had to do was just literally roll cast the wolves out every time. And the strangest thing happened to me. And I still can't believe what happened to this day, and I still try and work it out. But the 3 wolves went down at the same time, and there were 3 kind of 12, 13-inch fish. And I landed the 3 of them.
Really?
I put the 3 of them into the net, would you believe? And I realised then Oak Gerard have a hatchery for trout for the lake, and the shallows at the back of Rabbit Island is one of the places that they dump all the fry. So, and they tend to stay in the same area, and they tend to shoal. So that's exactly what happened then. But it was quite amazing because there's a lad on the Corrib, and I actually seen him fishing the 2 rods, fishing the dries on one rod and the dap on the other, and he's a good angler. And I says, I'd love to try that someday, just to see could I do it. And that was fun. So dapping is not boring when you're fly casting as well at the same time in your other hand.
Ambidextrous. At the same time.
At the same time.
I think the dap will take more fish than the other day.
You'll get way bigger fish dapping.
32, Jimmy Turrell. Once you get a confidence in one colour, you might have a slightly different shade, and you don't feel right. It's got to be that bang-on colour you've been catching on.
Yeah, I do a lot of them. I have a few flies that I tie for people, detached body mayflies. Now, it's my body, and it's my fly, if you know what I mean. It's one that I come up with, and it catches a lot of fish on Corrib. But I have a boatman up there, Gilly, up in Lough. He specifically has this one fly, and it's the colours, because I sent up a few different ones to him when I was doing it. But one colour seems to work better than the rest of them. I actually do that fly, tie a lot of them. I actually done a lot of the weekend now, because there'd be a lot of people looking for them. I put one up on, I think I put one up last weekend. I have another one going up this weekend on Facebook. I put one up every week.
I noticed the duck flies was this week, wasn't it?
Yeah, I put duck flies up, but I put a mayfly up on Friday as well, I think. Yeah, even that duck fly now, I've already got three orders for that already.
I bet they look fishy. When I saw the picture, it was like a hatch in your hand. You can imagine they're going to be killing.
They're nice now, and that's very small. They're only on a 16. But that fly works well now. But again, that's a fly that I got from somebody years ago, that colour.
Yeah,
because the hackle on it is just a different colour, yeah. So it's just fly tying. Everybody has a favourite, but when you tie into so many different people, I always get a lot of flies sent to me to copy. So it makes you wonder. A lot of it's not the fly, it's the light on a lot of patterns. Whatever way the light is shining on the day to hit that, because you can tie up 6 flies, basically all the same, but just vary the shades, and they'll all catch fish.
205, Darren Williams.
And I'd have to have a yellow peril, because even if it's just for Campbell, Anthony Cam, I caught a £10 fish on it. I mean, I don't know whether I told you about this back in 2004.
No?
Yeah. I caught a £10 4-ounce brown on that very fly.
Where?
On Corrib.
Oh, you've had a double from it?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez, I didn't know that.
Yeah. In fact, I almost had 2 the same day.
So that's the fly you've made up?
Yeah, that's the one Campbell made up originally. Yeah, and it's basically...
It's a pulling fly?
Yeah. Big, heavy, size 8 on a point. That's right. This one, I actually had a big size 8 on a top dropper, because it took my top dropper. I was fishing 4 flies. We were right up the top end of the Duras, almost it is the last island on the Corrib up off the Dura side, where we are. There's one small island there. We call it Peter's Island, because Peter Walsh, who we go out from his jetty, we call it Peter's Island. So I don't know what the name of it, to be honest.
Right.
But and all the years I've known it as Peter's Island. Look,
that's big fish country. That is there.
Well, there was a guy who fishes it now to this day. His name he's a Frenchman. What's his name now? I can't think of his name. But anyway, I'm driving down with the lads. I'm just about to pull into the jetty, and he's drifting past in a boat, and he's shouting, "Come!" He can't speak very good English. Come! His rod is bent over, right, and he's into a fish, and he fishes the roach. He does, trolling for pike. But anyway, he got a £15 trout on.
Did he?
Yeah, I netted for him. Yeah.
Up by the point
right in front of us. It wasn't like 10 foot from a jetty.
Yeah. Magnificent. Do you know what?
Oh, you want to see the colour on that fish up there?
Photographs. When you see photographs of a fish, it's impressive.
Daniel, his name is. I couldn't think of his name. Daniel.
All right. Yeah. But when you see a double figure, Corrib brown, it's like jaw dropping, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, the one I had, in the morning, we'd fished down more towards the point of the Duros. And I was with Des James. And we always meet for dinner. Do you know the Schoolhouse Bay with the tunnel?
Yes.
Right, that's where more or less we was. In between the islands and there.
All right.
And I'd missed a big one.
Looks fishy there, doesn't it?
Oh, well, I mean, Peter who fishes if all his life, that's his area. He always says, I love it there.
The boulders below you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, this fish had come over my flies and missed my flies. It was huge. So I went over there. I even went over there with a dapping rod just to see if it was, because it was sipping up my mayflies. And anyway, it disappeared anyway. So Des said, we got to go for dinner. So we met the boys. We went all the way back up to Peter's jetty, where we, which is probably a mile up the lake to have to meet the boys for dinner. And Des says to me, after dinner, what are we doing now? I said, well, let's go back and get that fish. Let's go back over that fish, if he comes back up on the feed. So anyway, on the way down, we had an 8-door Suzuki N, if I remember at the time, and I'm on the engine, I'm flat out. And I'm just passing Peter's Island in front of us now. And a big fish, took a mayfly on my left-hand side. I mean, he was probably 10 feet from the engine.
Wow. And
Des said, turn the boat around. But by the time Des said, turn the boat around, I'm already in a circle, doing a massive circle. And, of course, I got the boat spun round roughly where I thought he was. And the second cast, I dibbled the flies across and that become sweet as nut, took a top dropper.
Wow.
And all I saw was a tail. Well, you've had double figure fish. All I saw was a fish trying to get water, trying to get, back into the water. And it just, this big tail flapping in midair.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Oh, my God. My heart was in my mouth. And, of course, I can feel him, but until he takes a run, you don't know he's on, do you, really?
Yeah.
And it just dove to the floor. I'm not kidding. In one run, just straight to the bottom. And, of course, I mean, Des now is winding in. And he knows I need as much room. He don't want to get in a tangle with this thing. So he turns around to me. He said, we can drift all the way to... Don't lose it. We can drift all...
then?
No, it was lovely conditions. It was a perfect wave, if you want to call it that. And he said, you can drift all the way to Galway, he said. Just don't lose it. But I had it on care, I'm not kidding you. I was up one side of the boat. I think I don't know how many laps of that boat. Up the one end, up Des's end, round the front of the point.
He loved going under the boat, didn't he?
Oh, my God. But I'd already had and of course, we used to take a couple of fish in them days, and we didn't eat them. We were giving them to locals, and they all, ordered them.
Yeah.
So, anyway, after about, it must have been at least half an hour, 40 minutes I got this fish on. I can't do nothing with it, seriously. And eventually, it's coming to... We talked about netting it. I don't know how many times me and Des, are we going to do this now? And
but you're thinking the net isn't big enough.
I mean, I was afraid of losing it. Because the water out there is so deep and black in it, you know what it's like. You only get sight of it when it gets up to a certain depth. And
you had golden flash then, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was like, wow. And then it came to the surface and it went in the net first try. And he pulls her on board and we are both looking in the bottom of the boat. I mean, it's 30 odd inches long. A fish like that is... Yeah. I mean, against it was a 2-pound fish in a boat, and it was like a little minnow compared to this. So yeah, I've been lucky enough to have, You
didn't keep that, no?
It's in my clubhouse.
Oh, you've had it done,
I've had it stuffed, yeah.
Who done it for you?
The guy, I think the same guy done yours in Galway.
In
John something, is it?
Yeah, John.
John
Thomas.
John Thomas, that's it. Yeah.
148, Colin Dodd. And I gotta say, it's probably the best location I ever sat down to chat with anyone.
Yeah.
What's this place called again?
This is the Diamond House. It's on the opposite side of the lake to where we went out there to our shore, Dad's shore.
Why is it called Diamond? It's not the shape, no?
I presume it's the shape of it. It used to be called the Wash House, but it had been known locally as the Diamond House. We don't know it as the Diamond House and have done for generations. But it was part of the old Hollybrook estate. I think it was a wash house for the maids and the servants in the house. They used to come down and wash the clothes. They're beside the lake here and they could light a fire.
You say the house, is it like a
There's
mansion?
Hollybrook House is just down around the next bay. We'll fish it. Excellent hatches of fly, brilliant. The mayfly started to show the first couple of days in May. Within the first week, 3rd or 4th of May, there was hatches. There was spent fishing actually within 2 or 3 days, and very good spent fishing down the far side, down under Snail Bay. That's where we'd see the mayfly first. It would come up there first around McCormick's or under Snail Bay. It would be 2 or 3 days earlier down there than it would up with us here.
Yeah.
Excellent hatches, I was saying. I think it was down really to weather conditions. It did get quite cold in the evenings with the northwesterlies. But during the day, it was just so mild and so settled. I don't think there was a day in May, bar the first couple of days, that I didn't see spent going on the water. You could have fished spent any evening in May, which is unusual. You know, you don't always get the conditions. As a result, massive hatches of fly. Fishing was excellent at times and then tough at others. Like it was on and off.
It's more of a dry fly water than a wet water, yeah?
Yeah, it is. Look, wet's still, wet's is just as productive, if even more so than dry fly. But given the conditions, you could fish dries here all year round.
It's got the history and reputation.
Yeah. It's so. You don't have big expanses of water like you do on the other lakes and the western lakes. It's indented with bays and reedy marshes and markers coming out into the lake and points, and you have big islands you can fish along. It's just you can fish any bay here, you know.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a Patreon. We will get weekly podcasts and access over 200 episodes, behind the scenes photography to go with each episode, plus other exclusive content and prizes. To become a Patreon, visit patreon.com/casting with Ceri Jones, or you can find the link on my website, castingwithcerijones.com. That's all for now. Tight lines, and may they always be up in the wave.